My name is Jo Baxter, Josephine, but Jo for short. I'm from Australia and representing Drug Free Australia, and I'm a moderator today. I have great pleasure in being a moderator for our three speakers on the topic of drug testing in North and South America and its future internationality. In other words, its expansion. We'll look forward to hearing from the three speakers. Our first person is Dr. Martin, who's currently the chairman of the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association, known as DATIA. And you might have noticed that there is actually a table with some information and brochures, more information on his organisation in the foyer. It's the largest drug and alcohol testing industry association in the world. He has been involved with health and drug issues in the US and internationally for over 30 years, and has been instrumental in the development of research technologies in the area of substance abuse detection and treatment. He founded one of the first clinical laboratories to specialise in the diagnosis and treatment of psychiatric and substance abuse disorders. Dr. Martin has served as anti-doping administrator for several international sports tournaments, such as the Davis Cup, Wimbledon, Grand Slam, and professional motorsports. So welcome, David, to the podium, and I'm sure that he will tell us a great deal about his experience.
Good morning. We have the luxury of a very small, intimate group this morning. So, please, don't hesitate to raise your hand, ask questions, stop me, because my co-authors... Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely. This is the kind of guy I like. It tells me exactly what... It's our three, your three panelists this morning, the co-authors, have known each other for years. And every time we get together, we have very complicated and sometimes challenging conversations about drug testing and our industry. So we want to include you in this conversation. We want this to be an open forum. We have the luxury of having a very intimate small group, so please, join in and help us understand how we can help you. Because I believe we're on the edge of a worldwide drug abuse pandemic that will affect the most vulnerable in our society, and that's the children. Children are directly affected by drug violence. They're used in drug trafficking, abused by the lack of care with the breakdown of the family unit. Children are the innocent victims of drug abuse worldwide. So much that I feel that we're sacrificing an entire generation to chemical slavery, as Dr. Dupont put it so well yesterday. Drugs have also become the international currency of terrorism, which is ripping apart the very fabric of our society. Evidence now shows that suicide bombers worldwide are often intoxicated, influenced by drugs, opium in particular, and their suicide vests are remotely detonated. The Mumbai terrorists in India were under the influence of steroids, methamphetamines, and opiates. We simply can't allow this global expansion of drug abuse to continue. For if it's left unchecked, society as we know it today is not going to exist. But there's good news. And drug abuse is one of the most preventable and successfully treated behavioral disorders that we have today. And the state-of-the-art of drug testing, supported by a balanced drug policy, is a technology solution for successful education, prevention, treatment. That's if we have the will and the courage to implement it. And it's everybody in this room and this conference that has that responsibility. Our panel today brings three unique perspectives. I approach drug testing from pure laboratory science perspective and never see a patient, okay? Brian Drew's specialty is providing medical review officer services. And that's a confidential medical interview for individuals who test positive for drugs. So all of his work is dealing with patients. He does that over 250,000 times a year. Could you imagine a conversation with 250,000 of drug addicts with positive drug test results? Patricio Labatut is a full-service drug testing company, from basic education, policy development, drug testing, MRO treatment. He does it all. And he does it in a part of the world that supplies drugs to most of us in North America and you here in Europe. But he has the advantage of starting his drug program from the beginning and taking advantage of all the mistakes we made in the United States. And we hope to share them here with you and serve as a foundation for building a better program. We have over 20 years of experience in this, and I hope we're going to begin a conversation that will continue for many years as we get to know each other. Our educational objectives today, the first one will be to review the recent drug testing technology and advances. Well, I'm going to do that for you right now, okay? As a laboratory scientist that's been studying this area for over 20 years, testing in urine, hair, oral fluid, sweat, and breath, the advancements are nothing less than astonishing and stunning. Sometimes theory precedes technology. We're at a stage where technologies has clearly progressed much faster than our policies to implement them. If drug testing were done within the framework of a modern, compassionate, balanced drug testing policy, there's a protection for the person being tested, and there's also a protection for the organization that's testing. However, unfortunately, that's not the case. Right now, right here, somewhere in Europe and in the United States and all over the world, drug testing is done inappropriately, placing not only the person who's tested at risk, but also the person, the organization that's testing at risk as well. So, the next thing, what we're going to do is a brief historical perspective, focusing on the events that developed our federal drug testing program in the United States. By the way, our program's not perfect, it's not complete, it does not incorporate all new technologies that's available, but it's a work in progress and a foundation that we can all build upon. Next, we're going to review the federally mandated versus non-mandated testing to give you an idea of the success and limitations of some of them. And then we're going to follow the money, because that's what it's all about. What it comes down to is, what is the cost to society? What is the cost of drug testing to individual companies, where 70% of all drug users are employed? So it may be a foundation and a point for us to start by saying, in order to keep your jobs, you need to be drug tested and you need to be clean. This gives employers also a reason, employees a reason not to use drugs, and employers financial reasons to do drug testing. Next, we'll look at the success in the United States since we've implemented drug testing, and also review a recent study by DATIA where we evaluated the current impact of drug testing. Please take one of these magazines. It is a special issue dedicated to the efficacy and the cost-benefit of drug testing. Then we'll focus on the new American drug epidemic. And I refer to it as a perfect storm. I'll explain that a little bit later on. Then, Patricio Labatut, who will orientate you to the South American drug experience and drug testing programs, and bring you new data on some of the poisons, yes, poisons that are added to crack cocaine in South America. Brian Drew will then summarize the lack of international testing and provide you the beginning of some steps. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, and this is what we hope to accomplish today. Then we'll hopefully open up for a spirited question and answer period. So with that, any questions? You doing okay? You feeling comfortable? Would you like a cup of coffee, take some water or anything? Next slide. It was a clear, calm night, 160 miles off of the Florida coast. The Caribbean was warm and inviting. There was no storms, no high seas, and the pilots could see clearly their landing zone cruising majestically below them. It was the United States Nimitz, the world's largest nuclear-powered super aircraft carrier, was on a training mission. It was about midnight, and most of the 5,000 sailors on the ship were asleep. The pilot of the $70 million Grumman Prowler fighter banked into position for a final approach to the aircraft carrier. The steel deck was within sight, was 3 soccer fields long. He eyed the tail hook, which would go and grasp as this wheels hit the deck and his engine would stop. He would pull him to a complete stop. Then everything went wrong. The plane veered to the right and crashed into a string of aircraft packed close together. Within seconds, 3 Marine officers that were in the prowler died. So did 11 of the ship's crew. Burning and flaming jet fuel was struck by shrapnel. 48 more sailors were injured, some seriously. Fuel tanks became incendiary bombs. Ejector seats blew up of aircraft. Fuel tanks became bombs. Machine guns, which were overheated, became firing. Missiles were detonated. It was pure hell, according to one of the servicemen who were there and survived. Drug testing of the crew afterwards demonstrated that there was marijuana on board the pilots and even some of the crews in the deck tanks. The Secretary of the Navy implemented a drug testing program that revealed a major substance abuse problem in the United States military. Look at this. Over here, before drugs testing started, almost half of the American military was using some sort of substance. Certainly was more in the Army than any of the other ones, but immediately after drug testing was put into place, that decreased to about 22%, and it steadily declined every year after that to about 1% today. But that's at least what we think with the existing technology and existing testing that's going on in the military. Next slide. Yes, sir.
But stopped with 1988.
Since then, it's sort of leveled off around 1%, but what I'm suggesting is that maybe we're not testing for all of the drugs we should be testing. Specifically, the Air Force, our current chairman for DATIA is the Quality Control Supervisor for the United States Air Force, and they just recently started testing for synthetic opiates, synthetic marijuana, and other designer drugs. I can't report to you what they found, but I know it's very alarming. So at this point, that's with our existing technology and existing panel. Again, our technology is way better than the existing panels, but it's the policy that needs to catch up to it. Thank you for the question. Anything else? So, look at this. Now, I wish Bob DuPont was here. This is a joke I was going to tell. This is a picture of Bob and I in Harvard in the 1960s, and that's him working on a gas chromatograph, and I'm the short one over here with the clipboard. But actually, this is the way the technology looked only 30, 40 years ago. And it was limited. It was like, you waited for days to get the machines up to the point of running, and if it ran right and the wind was in the right place, the moon and the stars worked, the test came out okay. Unfortunately, it didn't always happen like that. At that same point in time, in 1968, the first testing was done in Mexico City. It was done only for research, and no athletes were actually affected by it. At the same time, in the United States, there was a great hippie anti-war movement with the return of soldiers from Vietnam. And those soldiers were coming back addicted to heroin and other drugs. So there was a very noticeable increase in the amount of drug addiction in the United States in the 1960s, 1970s, and with the crash of the Nimitz, and several crew members found to be positive, an extensive study was done by the military, and the conclusion was that we had to do more drug testing. However, during that same time, all those same recovering soldiers from Vietnam came back and were in recovery programs. And the recovery programs in the United States were methadone maintenance-based programs. They had to have drug testing done. And what was found is that the drug testing results usually didn't match. They were very inconsistent. So the Center for Disease Control made a study, and Hansen and his group reported that there was a crisis in drug testing, and that's in 1985. And what was happening is that there was close to an 80 to 90% false positive rate of drug testing in the United States. Anybody have an idea why that would be? Well, the answer is they weren't doing the drug testing for the most part. They were just throwing it down the drain, charging $10 or $20, whatever it was. It was a disgrace. There wasn't proficiency programs set up anywhere in the country. And at the same time, we have soldiers being killed on aircraft that are affected by drugs, soldiers coming back. that need drug treatment. So that forced the executive order by Ronald Reagan to establish a federal drug-free workplace program. But how do you do that? Where do you start? You know, we're in the background of technology that wasn't consistent. What type of drug testing would you do? Each lab had their own criteria for what was positive, and it was very possible that you would have one drug test done in one laboratory and it would come back positive, and take that same drug test to another laboratory and it would come back negative. What about the human rights of the donors? What about medical privacy if they're on medication that would interfere with the test? For some of the basic issues had to be set up. We knew we wanted pre-employment testing. We knew we had to have random testing. But what was for-cause testing? What was reasonable suspicion? What was periodic analysis? That's during an annual physical, you would have a drug test. Post-accident, obviously, we had to have that after the minutes. And then once you get out of treatment, you needed some return-to-duty testing. All of this stuff had to be worked out. Well, it ended up establishing a government employee program called mandated testing. You'll hear us refer to that throughout the talk. And then non-government employees had non-mandated testing. The biggest employer of mandated testing in the United States is the Department of Transportation. They have over 10,000 individuals that are tested. And they all, if they test positive, have to have a medical review done by somebody like Brian's laboratory or Brian's company to go and ask if there was any medical reason or medications that may have caused that positive. Clearly, though, the government-mandated testing was very limited and only tested for drugs, not alcohol. Okay? 5 drugs: marijuana, cocaine, opiates, amphetamines, and PCP. Now, the rationale behind that was that it was for illegal drugs only. Okay, so those were illegal drugs, street drugs, and it was cleaner to be able to do that. Prescription drugs really weren't included because of the complication with having a medical prescription. Let's go back to the timeline. So, by 1986, we had the federal executive order, and by 1988,
Omnibus Transportation Act.
Well, that was 1981. The first thing that hit the ground was the Drug-Free Workplace Act in 1988. And the first drug testing began under that program, but not for all drug use and not for alcohol. It wasn't until this happened. It was a subway crash. On August 1991, 5 people were killed and more than 200 were injured when a train derailed going over a switch in Union Square in New York City. Service on the subways was closed down for a week. The guy who was running the train left the scene of the accident. He was found 6 hours later. Then he was tested, and he was tested positive with 2 times the amount of legal limit of alcohol in his system. Plus he had marijuana detected as well. It was because of that the Omnibus Transportation Act then came about to include alcohol. We had to go figure out how we're going to do the alcohol. It's going to be breath alcohol. It's going to be evidentiary alcohol. How are we going to put all those technologies in place? So, and that resulted in what we affectionately call the Part 40, which was the drug testing rule under which we all go and operate in the United States, which includes only 5 drugs of abuse and alcohol. But it's been in place now for over 20 years, and we have a lot of experience, and it has had a tremendous amount of positivity. Right now, the future of drug testing is really on an international scale. All the technologies over the last couple of years have developed. The old machinery, which Bob and I would climb up with ladders and try and fix, are now on convenient desktops. As a matter of fact, there's breath testing technologies available right now that could go and revolutionize drug testing as we understand it. We have a new Part 40 that's revised. It's going to include opiates, synthetic opiates, oral fluids. And the future really is taking this foundation and bringing it internationally, because we live in a time when there are high-speed rail crashes all over the world. We don't know what happened in China. Although, we don't know what happens with airlines. Now, This was a very good example. In 1988, a Continental Express crashed near Denver Airport, killing both pilots and 7 passengers. The pilot was found to have sufficient cocaine in his body to indicate usage within the past few hours. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, and I missed it, so you can always show him the slide. Okay, that's easy enough to go back to. Going the wrong way. Right? There you No. There we go. Here's a picture of Bob and I working in his laboratory in Boston. I'm the short guy over here with the clipboard. But that was the technology that we were faced with during that period of time. Yes, sir, you have a question?
No.
So, anyway, here we go. And it's very interesting. Joe Persh, who you remember, right,
sure,
made this comment. He said that according to the Federal Aviation Administration, in 1970, 20% of fatal aircraft accidents in the United States in general aviation involved drugs or alcohol, and mostly alcohol. A study of naval aviators hospitalized in Bethesda, Maryland's hospital for psychiatric services between 1960 and 70 indicated that 22% were diagnosed as having alcoholism and 54% were heavy drinkers. Let me not forget to remind you that there was a time, not long ago, where pilots were brought cocktails while they were flying aircraft, right? And in fact, that still occurs in some countries. Fortunately, that's no longer the case in the United States. And impaired recovery programs for pilots are clearly one of the best. Now, earlier last year, 2 children died in a crash in the Midwestern state of a school bus. And 50 were injured, and the driver was positive for cocaine. And I ran a drug testing program for one of the largest schools. You're doing school drug testing here, right? I ran one of the largest drug testing programs for school buses in the United States in Florida. It broke my heart every time I would see a positive for methamphetamine, alcohol, cocaine in a school bus driver that was randomly taken, maybe before he was going to drive children to school. Now, this is 20 years after the United States has had drug testing put into place, and that still goes on. In China, again, more and more accidents occur, and it's estimated that in China alone, there's 100,000 lives are lost on the highways. Yet we don't do drug and alcohol testing, so we don't know the impact over there. Take a look at this. A dated slide, but it just clearly shows that the approximate cost of substance abuse in the United States is dwarfing. Recently, if you go and combine diabetes and cancer, the cost in America right now is still eclipsed by the cost of substance abuse. In a recent study done on the Center of Addiction and Substance Abuse, and I want to quote this, under any circumstances, spending more than 95% of taxpayer dollars on crime, health care, costs, child abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, all the result of tobacco and alcohol and prescription drug abuse, and only 2% on individuals, only 2% on prevention to relieve these individuals, is a reckless miscalculation of public funds. And in these economic times, such a policy is unconscionable, and it's past time that we fix it and end this human waste. Again, it's an example of how policy is lagging behind the technology. So, a past Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, Joseph Califano, is now the chairman of the Center of Addiction and Substance Abuse, called CASA, in Columbia University. He wrote a book called High Society, How Substance Abuse is Ravaging the American Society and What We Can Do About It. And he estimates that the drug problem alone, including alcohol, caught all the costs, all the criminal law, everything that goes on in society is approximately $1 trillion. This is alarming. The gross national product of the United States is only $14 trillion. So the striking question is, why, if the United States has a drug testing program, all this education, why is there so much drug abuse in the United States? Well, the answer is simple. The United States has been and continues to be the largest consumer of illegal drugs in the world. And it's that continuing consumption of new forms of drugs that's making the problem even worse. The best example is this. Americans account for only 4.5% of the world's population, but consume 90% of the hydrocodone, the main ingredient in Vicodin. Okay, so let's say that again. We're only 4.5% of the population, but we're consuming 90% of a pharmaceutical that's produced for pain. Again, our technology for testing these drugs, accurately and reliable, has been available for decades, but our mandated federal drug testing program does not include prescription drugs such as Vicodin, hydromorphone, or synthetic opiates. What happens? Well, it's very clear. Productivity is lower in the job. Absenteeism is 2.5 more, or it's 9 versus 17 days a year for somebody who's on drugs. It's, again, morale is low in these environments where there's drug abuse going on in a company. Accidents of the drug-abusing employee is 3.6 times more than a non-abusing employee, accounting for about $7,000 a year. Medical benefits for drug abusers are 6% higher, or about $19,000 a year. Theft is 18% higher, and 44% sold drugs on the job. So there's a tremendous amount of work that is just wasted because of drug abuse. This is a study that was done by the American Management Association, again, showing that higher productivity in businesses that have drug abuse programs is increased by 19%. Lower absenteeism, lower accident rates, that alone pays for your drug testing program. And I want to direct you to the Quest site, and I can give this to you later on. There's a return on investment calculator, which suggests that drug testing investment can be returned up to 7 times, depending upon the industry that you're in. Take a look at what's happened to our positivity rate in the United States since drug testing was implemented in 1988. You can see it's gone steadily down, and now it's hovering around 4%. But these samples may not be, this data may not be accurately reflecting the abuse of drugs that's not being tested. For example, this only tests for 5 drugs, not the synthetic opiates or the emerging drugs, so synthetic designer drugs and synthetic marijuana. Again, the data to go and address this issue, since there wasn't studies done within the last 10 years, did our own study and found that the SHRM, which is the Society of American Human Resource Management members, reported a 19% increase in productivity once a program is put into place, 5% decrease in absenteeism, 16% decrease in employee turnover rates, and an 8% decrease in workers' comp or accident rates. Imagine the impact that has on an individual company. In summary, here's what the United States Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration has to report: that drug testing is shown to improve employee morale and productivity, decreased absenteeism, all of the stuff we talked about before. But that's not the end of the story. But we're going to stop there for a second. Give a 7th inning stretch. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. 5 minutes. So we got an hour and a half. They have very short presentation. Is there any questions? Yes.
When accidents happen and connected with drug abuse or alcohol, how often does that go public?
Usually immediately it's required. Under the federal laws, it's required to be publicly released. And maybe Brian can talk about that a little.
I think, are you asking, does it get out into the press and in the news? I think that happens more so when there's a large number of fatalities. You hear about accidents every day on the news in America, unfortunately. I don't think they talk about how often the person showed up positive because it's a negative impact on the company. I wish it did. If every time one of these truck drivers or a bus driver for a school system showed up positive, and we see it every day, if it went public, people would be astounded at how often that's the case, that accident occurred, most likely because of some sort of impairment. It's sad, but it doesn't go as public in that way. I mean, it's public that the accident occurred, not necessarily the cause of the accident. It's unfortunate.
Is there a considerable resistance against going public?
I don't know if it's necessarily a resistance. I just think it doesn't capture the news media attention as much. The accident is more important than the cause of the accident. It's just the most interesting thing to me because every day we see accidents and we process post-accident drug tests on a daily basis, positives. But you don't ever read about it in the newspaper or other than there was an accident on Highway 91 or whatever the accident was. But it's the big ones that multiple people were injured or killed that it does hit the press, the cause of the accident. But there's not a resistance to it, I don't think. People in America, they understand the cause and the need for drug testing. Just unfortunately, the news media doesn't grasp on to that cause of the accident and highlight the idea that drugs are.
You got to remember, there's only 5 drugs that are used under the DATIA system that are being tested. So, unless the policeman actually takes a blood sample, and then it goes into a 6-month or a year process before it goes to our court systems, which is very baroque and archaic and Byzantine. So, it is not a routine that all positive drug tests are reported in public, but that information is available.
It is, yeah. You can find out. I just think the American society is just fast-paced. Yes, there was an accident. And the media is just not interested.
All right. So, what's this perfect storm of drug abuse going on? Well, it was about 2 years ago that I remember going to a meeting where Pierre Johnson, the General Secretary of this organization, was given an award by Bob DuPont. And Bob DuPont said what he said yesterday. And it brought chills up my spine, and it still does. Because never before in the history of mankind has there been so many powerful addictive drugs so easily and readily available. We're taught, just think about it. This is terrifying. The implications to our society and our children are just terrifying and could result in the end of civilized society as we know it right now. Just look at the effects in Mexico. Right? The most important message we can give to you today is that we're right now living in a perfect storm of drug abuse, and the full force is not yet hit. Right here and right now, because never before in mankind's history have we had literally thousands of drugs coming into the market that are very powerful and easily available. And these are only the prescription drugs. There's also thousands of synthetic or designer drugs that are going to be going on. K2, spice, chemical sprayed on oregano, all legal and undetectable by routine drug tests, but are not technology out of reach, that are not technologically out of reach. It's interestingly enough, it was the military that started drug testing, and it's the military now that's testing for designer drugs and prescription drugs. So again, they're leading the way. Background of all this is the fraud in medical marijuana in the United States, creating a permissive environment. And take, for example, this is a Kentucky Fried Chicken store that was converted into a medical marijuana dispensary. Now they have a new system and a new interesting marketing technique. They will actually deliver to your house medical marijuana if you're a customer, sort of like ordering a pizza these days in California. So there's a shift to non-street drugs as we know it right now, prescription medications, synthetic opiates. Certainly, Gil Kurlikowski was here and talked about the silent epidemic. Thomas Friedland talked about the epidemic that kills more than cocaine and heroin combined. Here's some of the interesting statistics. And we're just going to move right along so that I can just share with you this. But right now, we have Americans consuming about 80% of the world's pain pills. But take a look at this next generation of pill that's coming out. Vicodin right now is hydrocodone and acetaminophen. Zohydro, which is going to be released next year, it has 10 times the amount of hydrocodone in it. It's going to be a new epidemic, and it's going to be very easily available through the internet, through your pill stores, and that doesn't include the synthetic drugs that are emerging right now, the bath salts, the industrial chemicals. There's performance drugs that are going to be coming out of London, says we're going to have a new crop of performance-enhancing drugs because of the Olympics. And unfortunately, also here's another example of drug testing being able to test lower levels. So last year, the federal government will lower the level of cocaine positive rate, lowered the level of cutoffs for positive rates, and what happened is cocaine positives spiked 33% and amphetamines jumped 26%, all because of the technology that was there was finally implemented. And again, oxycodone was up by 10%. Impaired professionals can talk a lot more. I'm just going to go and turn it over to our good friend. Here's an example of our 10 drug test panel that we have. And this is the panel that I think we're going to be seeing in the future. I'd be happy to share any of these slides with somebody, but right now I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Patricio, who's going to lead the way in South America and give us an overview of what's going on there. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Wow, what an eye-opener. Thank you, David. These gentlemen do work together regularly, and so it's really nice to see the framework that we're developing in our information. Now, Patricio Labatut is he's the co-founder and executive director of Global Partners, a national firm that specialises in implementing drug-free workplace programs at South American countries, which include the A&D policies, legal aspects, workshops, and drug testing. Mr. Labatut currently serves as a member of the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association, in other words, DASH's board of directors. Besides, he is chairman of the International Committee of DASH. He also serves as vice president of consulting companies and manager for foreign investments and insurance instruments at Citibank, Santander Bank, and others. So he is very diverse and skilled, and we look forward to hearing his perspective after hearing what's happening in the United States.
Hi, good morning. Okay, in these first slides I want to tell you quickly which countries are in South America, the population, the language, and they are correct to know a little bit more about South America. South America includes 12 independent countries: Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Paraguay, Peru, Suriname, Uruguay, and Venezuela. The main language is Spanish and Portuguese. Portuguese is Brazil. Portuguese speaking is around 192 million, and they speak Spanish 193. Just almost 50% of each of countries. South America has an area of 17.8 million square kilometers. This population is of 2008 has been estimated more than 385 million. And South America ranks fourth in area after Asia, Africa, and North America, and fifth in population after Asia, Africa, Europe, and North America. Chile and Uruguay will have by 2014 similar per capita income to developed countries, and will therefore have similar problems related with drug abuse. Colombia is an historical producer of cocaine. Today, this problem is more controlled by the government. Peru, Ecuador, I'm going to show you. Peru and Ecuador, this is the other one. Also are cocaine producers also at the region, only for cultural mothers. But today their production is to satisfy the consumption of developing countries, as US and Europe. South American cocaine, the new epidemic. The current South American cocaine epidemic is very different from North America and Europe. Most North American countries and European cocaine is powder or hydrochloride form, which is inhaled or injected by the wild in South America. Cocaine is used in form of the crack which is smoked, also mixed with marijuana or tobacco. Unfortunately, a new wave of crack manufacturing in the jungle labs or homes and refers to as Merca, Oxy, Pasuco, Pastabase, Falopa, is now spreading across South America. What makes this so important is that this new crack has a less complete cleans-up process. The manufacturing process is by products and has an intentional mixing of dangerous additives to make it, the new crack, a distinctive rock. It's inexpensive, perhaps only a few dollars for a small rock, but all the byproducts and additives make it very dangerous and deadly. And it is the most vulnerable of our society that are most at risk. The street children that are often used by the drug cartels. Mostly cocaine is manufactured in jungle-based camps, using very crude methods. One manufacturing camp will have a different methods than others. The process is not controlled by and is very unsanitary. The manufacturing process often leaves trace and sometimes significant amount of byproducts which are harmful and could cause serious illness. What's more concerning is the new wave of internationality, which some cocaine manufacturers add in jungle lab to make these products unique. It's now being reported in a topic of the recent meeting in Cracking Tampa, Florida, that is what is leaving the South American jungle cocaine lab. It's not simple pure cocaine or crack anymore. It's the cocaine plus, or the new crack plus. And we are just now beginning to understand what is added. Unfortunately, these additives are harmful and deadly. The most frequently found additives are pharmaceutical. Here are the list of some of the byproducts of cocaine and crack manufacturing that can be presented in the final product. All of these are used in different stages of production of cocaine powder or in this new crack that we are talking about. Cocaine byproduct detection. Crime labs can detect a number of byproducts, and actually they produce a signature of where the new crack was produced. This work is a joint effort of a number of international law enforcement agencies. However, not all these byproducts are easily detected in urine or other biological samples, at least not yet. But what is more important is detecting the wide range of additives that are intentionally put into the new crack or this new cocaine. Here is a list of some of the additives now found in South American cocaine powder or this new crack. It's interesting to see that hard medications that may alter the beat or the rhythm of the heart rate are added. This rabbit heart is interpreted as getting high by some abusers. Unfortunately, one of the more frequent additives is many pain reliever that cause cancer. This medication has shown up recently in Europe in the new crack from South America origin. The local anesthetics are frequently used. They cause tingling and then numbing. Amphetamines, antidepressants, pain relievers, antihistaminic, and even medication that expel worms all are added on this new cocaine or new crack probably now is spreading to North America and Europe. Inhalants for children. Additional to this new cocaine epidemic, we still deal on the street of South America with the inhalants like gasoline, toluene, and paint, and etc. This is actually a big deal for us. Our children can get it for free. They can ask, for example, in a gas station for a small quantity of gasoline in a plastic bag, or just in the construction for some solvents left after work hours. It's going to show some numbers from the World Drug Report 2011 in South America. This is an annual prevalence of cocaine in 2009, and you can see there Argentina and Chile, and Uruguay also is a small country there, with more prevalence, and the reason is just money. We are becoming into developed countries in South America, and the purchasing power is increasing, and this is the reason that we have more prevalence and we are consuming more cocaine. Expert perception of trend changes in the use of cocaine in 2009. This is Ecuador, this one, the small one, and the other one is Paraguay. We don't have data provided for Bolivia, but we know that there are important producers of cocaine as Colombia. The annual prevalence of cannabis use in 2009. All of these numbers are from a survey from the government or from the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime Annual Report Questionnaire. We know that this information is not so accuracy because it's only a survey. We are doing drug testing in some countries in South America and in our places, and we know that the numbers are higher than we can show here. Our trend changes in the use of cannabis in 2009. Express perception. In these cases, we have Ecuador there, no? Paraguay there, and Uruguay there, with some increases according with this report. Okay, we're going to see some numbers of Chile. The prevalence of drugs and alcohol use in Chile, according with this report, we have the real situation really is a little bit higher than the prevalence of cocaine pasta base. For example, in this inform we have 2.4, but we have 4 to until 5% of cocaine, and in marijuana we have 10%, according with our data source from testing. This is only a survey. We're going to see some facts in Chile about drug testing. There are no rules or regulation on drug testing protocols for private companies. The private companies use a pre-employment and occupational testing of A&D. There are at least 3 important laws related and in conflict. Labor code forbids working under the influence of alcohol. The mining code, this is the most important industry in Chile, forbids the drug and alcohol use in mining operation and allowing the police force if necessary. We have a presidential decree that establishes a testing protocol for public employees. In the courts, the trials for drug use in workplaces are just beginning. We don't have so many cases about that. You can find more information in this website. Probably you are going to have the presentation after to see that. Argentina. These are the prevalence of drugs in Argentina: 2.6 in cocaine, 7.2 in marijuana. There are no rules or regulation on testing protocol for private and public companies in Argentina. The private companies use a pre-employment and occupational testing of A&D. The labor code doesn't establish any reference to the topic of alcohol and drug at work. There is only one exception for the military factories. To ship human samples abroad, you must have a certification for animal that is equivalent to the FDA in US. You can find more information in this website also. Colombia. The product of drugs and alcohol use in Colombia information is based in the government source. But I can't believe these numbers really, because cocaine it can be 0.8, and because it's Colombia, is one of the biggest producers of cocaine in the world. We know that the situation in Colombia is improving, but not so much to have these numbers. Some facts in Colombia about the drug testing also. There are no rules or regulation and testing protocol for private and public companies. The private companies use pre-employment and occupational testing of A&D. The labor code forbids working under influence of alcohol or drugs, of course. And they have a presidential decree also that forbids drugs use at work for workers and whose activities involves risk to the others. This is an important thing. Contractors of large oil companies, aviation, and mining industry must be accredited under the Occupational Health, Safety, and Environmental Record Management System, which administrates the Colombian Safety Council. To be included in the RUC, you must have a drug and alcohol policy in Colombia. We can find more information in this website also. In summary, there are no rules on testing protocols for private and public companies, and we have the opportunity to establish international standards of the region. The private companies use a pre-employment and employment testing in A&D, usually when these are multinational or US-based companies. Less than 5% of the companies in South America are multinational companies. There are no specific laws related with drug and alcohol testing at workplaces. Some South American countries are well aware of the correlation of consumption, A&D, and accidents. We have a study researching in Chile that we have a 27% of accidents is the cause of these accidents are related with drug and alcohol use. International drug testing standards, there are no standards. At the end, we don't have standards in South America, international standards. There is a growing demand to know how to address this problem in South American countries, mostly by the private companies, multinational companies. This is a similar situation to pre-1980s in US. South America is looking for the best practices around the world in drug testing. Of course, North America, they have the most important knowledge about that, and in some European countries also. DATIA is working hard with the international organizations to establish drug and alcohol testing standards to promote drug-free workplaces environment in South American countries. Now my friend Brian Drew is the co-chairman of the International Committee. Will tell you how we are addressing this issue in Asia. You're going to do this.
Thank you very much. That's certainly expanded our knowledge as well. Interesting comparisons and future developments needed. It'll be good to hear now from Brian Drew. Just to put it into context, he's the owner and president of Nationwide Medical Review, a leading drug testing company that provides medical review officer, or MRO, and other services to employers and third-party administrators across the United States and in Canada. Brian Drew has worked with the major laboratories for years to streamline the electronic import of drug test results. So we can see where the technologies are coming in that David mentioned earlier. This has evolved into a proprietary software system designed to securely and confidentially report drug test results to customers. This software system is now launched as a web-based solution that meets all federal and state drug testing guidelines in America. What a great start for our internationalisation. We've already got the basis. Let's hear more.
Well, I must admit I'm not a speaker. I'm more of a patient intervention kind of guy. I spend most of my day talking to people about their positive drug tests and sort of helping the clients and the customers deal with what to do, how to react to that positivity. I am here today to talk to you about international drug testing standards and the drug and alcohol testing industry and how the industry association that is and how we as a group are trying to move forward in the international marketplace to assist in building a standard of testing so that the employer can be protected as much as the employee, which is the role of my service. You know, what I do for a living is protect not only the donor, the person that provided the sample, but also the employer, the ones that take action if there's a positive test. Because in the United States, as in everywhere, I'm sure, litigation is always a problem. You always have to worry about what is going to happen after the result. So to start, the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association was founded in 1995 and has grown to become the largest nonprofit drug testing industry association in the United States. It has, until now, focused its energies on U.S. drug testing. Its mission is to promote the highest standard in drug testing industry, be a coordinated voice for the industry, and represent the drug testing industry in Washington, D.C. and internationally. DATIA's scope of service includes, but is not certainly limited to, education, training, which includes collector training, supervisor training for signs and symptoms, designated employee representative training, and more. And it also provides certifications and accreditations of programs and companies. DATIA's membership includes collectors, third-party administrators, laboratories, medical review offices, testing equipment manufacturers, and employers. Its membership spans the globe, from not only all across the United States, but also the world, from Afghanistan to China to Chile and New Zealand. DATIA and its membership realized that with all of this U.S. history and proof of drug testing working as a deterrent, which is unique to the United States, that internationally similar standards needed to be created to enable similar positive results. DATIA is the first step in this 1,000-mile journey. DATIA has created an accreditation for drug testing programs that ensures the integrity of the testing system being used. Internationally, there needs to be a system in place so that basic standards are met no matter where testing is done. A system is necessary to create legal defensibility and reduce errors. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a system as an organized or established procedure. DATIA has created an accreditation for drug testing programs that establishes this system and helps set the standards, DATIA. In Europe alone, each country has their own unique drug testing regulations, if any at all. Some countries, like Belgium, have no specific instances allowing testing. Others, like Finland and Sweden, detail drug testing rules and when they're allowed. Harm reduction programs are gaining great ground throughout the European Union, which will cause more abuse and trafficking as we're learning throughout this forum. DATIA accreditation was created for drug testing as a deterrent, which is built on a system that has years of documented success, as presented earlier by Mr. Martin. The United States drug testing system has proven results, as again discussed earlier here today, that have provided legally defensible drug testing results to those using the system. It's when the system isn't used that problems occur. Collector errors, false positive results, as we talked about, employers misunderstanding or misrepresenting results and taking incorrect and indefensible action. The U.S. drug testing system the DATIA program accreditation has basic requirements. A written policy detailing who the testing applies to, what type of testing is performed, laboratory or instant testing with additional validation of non-negative results. As costs are an integral part of deciding to perform a drug test, the ability to allow for instant testing with non-negative laboratory confirmation helps to reduce the overall cost of the system. The accreditation also defines the commitment of management to provide a safe and drug-free work environment. Supervisor and employee education on not only the drugs of abuse and alcohol abuse, but the drug-free workplace program itself. The medical review officer, using a certified medical review officer, which is a licensed physician, who has had training and understands drugs and abuse. The role of the MRO hasn't been defined internationally to date, but the idea of having a laboratory drug test result reviewed by a physician is recognized in several countries' rules. The IDATIA accreditation suggests an accredited MRO, but requires at least a licensed physician to perform similar functions. The role of the MRO is an idea that is paramount to the process and accuracy of the results. The function of the physician is to validate the process from start to finish and provide the employee the opportunity to explain the findings of the laboratory. In turn, the MRO then reports a final determination of results to the employer, allowing the employer a greater security in the decision-making process of fitness for duty. I'm a huge proponent of medical review officer services. The program accreditation also provides for standards of the laboratory certification, the collection officer training, the chain of custody procedures, and the drug cutoff levels. Finally, the optional but suggested employee assistance program for those employees that need assistance in the treatment of drug abuse and alcohol abuse. All in all, the IDATIA program accreditation was created using 20-plus years of U.S. drug testing data and its working system, and has used some minimum standards to create a system that would work internationally to allow for defensible drug testing across the globe. In summary, here are the benefits of the IDATIA program accreditation and drug testing. And again, what the IDATIA program is accrediting is, the system is accrediting the drug-free workplace program. We're not accrediting a company or any idea other than you have a program in place, and we're meeting it up with set standards that have been used and defensible in court of law for 20-plus years. The idea, it increases business profits, it increases public health, it creates drug-free workplaces, it reduces drug demand. Our global future needs to be drug-free, and we set the standards for drug testing internationally. I thank you for your time and attention. Let me turn it back to Dr. Dave Martin.
Thank you, Brian. Now, here's our conclusions. I didn't get a chance to really spend a lot of time on the drug testing panels. I'd be happy to send you the individual panels and the slides later on. But we have to expand beyond 5 drugs and move into a 10 or at least 20 drug testing panel. That will be the panel of the future. Random testing. We can have all the testing in the world you want post-accident or pre-employment, but it's random testing that's shown to be a very effective deterrent. And for our school programs itself, we recognize and promote random drug testing as a very effective deterrent tool. Now, we need to also get creative and think out of the box and vary the testing panels. Not simply urine, saliva, or oral fluid gives you a better indication of recent exposure to drugs. Hair is more of a long-term effect. And there will be new and better technologies coming out, and so mixing and matching and putting together. Let me give you a good example. In the physician testing program in the United States, the panels are expensive. They could be $50, $100, whatever. But the physician doesn't know what he's going to be tested when he calls. He could be just tested for cocaine, which could be his drug of choice. Or he could be tested for 10. So varying the panel is a way of controlling the cost and moving forward. Again, sometimes theory precedes technology. We have time right now where technology has advanced so significantly that we need everybody in this room and this organization to help bring the policy up to date and to get it surrounded, because with a very effective, compassionate, balanced policy, drug testing is very safe. Let me just take a little. How many people here actually go through drug testing as part of their job? Here we go. All right, good. Yeah, there's the record. How many people here are currently abusing narcotic drugs and are under the influence? Oh, officer, here, that lady in the back over there. No, seriously, it was a drug test, was a question, was an intelligence test for a long time. All you had to do was stay off of drugs for a few days, drink a lot of water, and, the small amount of drugs that would be tested for would just disappear in your system. So now we have a pretty good fail-safe system surrounded by good, humane, balanced policy, and it's a safer future for our most vulnerable, our children. We owe it to them, everybody in this room and this meeting, to go and pull together and to provide a safe, drug-free environment for our children to grow up in a safe and responsible, happy, and productive way. Thank you so much for your time. Now let's have some questions. There has to be some questions here.
Please direct questions to any of the panel members, because this once, I'm sure everyone. And we've got plenty of time. That's great. I have one that I can ask, and it can be to all three.
Okay.
It's about school drug testing. So student drug testing in Australia, we don't have that on a broad scale. It's still under individual schools, and it's very rare because it just doesn't come along. I know in the United States the program is retail works. Is your involved?
It depends upon the individual school board, and I think Brian can talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, school testing in the United States, I think, I was talking to Tim yesterday about your Sweden school system. It is basically school system to school system, and each state will allow it or won't allow it at all. It is a hot topic, for sure, because you're testing students, but it's a voluntary program. I mean, all the ones that we deal with, I have a lot of school systems that we are the MRO for. The students agree to the process. And what they're testing for is just those students that are in any extra activity. It's not all students of the sports and the chess club and all of those. To participate, they have to pass the drug test. And they also have to be included in a random program. And it's the random program that is the deterrent, because everyone knows that marijuana stays in your system with what they think is 30 days. It's the positives that aren't aware that it's 45 to 60. So it's the random program in our United States school system that's deterring these children from taking works. The statistics, I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's showing that it is very effective. When they start these programs, they typically have a higher positivity rate, and after a year, it really drops off. But they are usually doing urine testing, which is unfortunate as David mentioned. We're not shifting things around. Like, to give you an example, we have a trucking company that has 20,000 employees. They do urine testing only on a pre-employment and random basis. Their positivity rate is 1% or lower every year, without fail, 10 years in a row. We just recently started doing hair testing on them on a pre-employment and random basis. The positivity rate is 6.5%, which is astounding. They were shocked to find that out. It's slowly going down over time, but they believe that's happening because on the pre-employment side, people know that they're doing hair testing, so the users aren't coming in for work, which is what they wanted anyway. Their safety rating is going up, obviously. I think if schools were to do that, change not just the matrix of the test, and as David mentioned, perhaps even the drugs they're testing for, because kids know. I mean, they learn that the school's going to test for marijuana, cocaine, and opiates. Oh, but mom's got some tramadol. And tramadol's not going to show up in the drug test. Or dad's got some Percocet. They're not looking for Percocet. And that's what kids do. They'll grab what's available.
Unfortunately, marijuana was a gateway drug for a lot of children. Initially in the United States, upwards of 30% of children in the 10 to 14 age range, had their first experience with marijuana and illegal drugs. Right now, that percentage is shifted, and the first experiment with drugs is pharmaceuticals from mom's cabinet, the tramadols, the opiates that are, now being distributed at parties. In the United States, if you were to go to a party, there'll be a bowl of drugs or pills that people would bring in and just dump the various, and they would just take the pills, and that's where we get a lot of our overdose cases from. It's a very, very scary environment. So this is a small little tile in the mosaic of what we're trying to present. Drug testing has had a very negative rap for a real long time, and especially in Europe, has been looked at as maybe an invasion of privacy. But now has become almost the same. If I were to tell you that there's a disease that could be cured and that could be very successfully managed on an outpatient basis, and all you have to do is do a test that costs maybe between $20 or $30, and you would save a large proportion of lives if you go ahead and do that test. Sure you will. Sure you will. And that's what drug testing is done. We do have an epidemic of drug abuse in our society right now. This is the early warning system. And if there's anything we can do to help you understand it, we're here for you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Johan Hari, I'm a British writer. Can I ask, when you find positive results, you must get people who say, my drug use is recreational, it's non-problematic. How do you respond to those people?
That's not part of the process in the United States testing program. The federal regulations don't allow for recreational use. It's an illegal substance. And if you're on it, you've used it illegally. There are the instances of the prescription-based drugs, currently morphine and codeine. If they do have a prescription for those, that's fine. We make sure the prescription was issued within a specific time period, and that the pill bottle is actually current. Because they have an expiration date. Your doctor doesn't prescribe you codeine or amphetamines forever. You can't just take one pill and then put it away, and then 6 years later, oh gosh, I hit my thumb, the nail, I better take a codeine instead of, for pain. So that's the function of the MRO, is to rule out those ideas of inappropriate behavior. The federal government in the United States says point blank, recreational use is not a medical explanation. I mean, we get that you smoke it on the weekends, but it's not okay because marijuana is not legal.
Being your role as you're providing counselling, so your default mode is that anyone who tests positive in any way has a drug problem?
No. I think the idea of a medical review officer is a little misconstrued. We're not a counselor.
I see.
We're the gatekeeper of the process.
Right.
So what we're doing is we understand, we know point blank what these regulations are. If you test positive for a drug and it's on the regulation that you're not allowed to be on that drug, we're not making any assertion that you have an addiction issue at all. What we're suggesting is that you've broken a rule. You were in violation, as we say, of the regulations, and you were no longer to perform whatever function on a safety level, driving a truck, driving a ship on the sea, flying an airplane, whatever mode of transportation you're dealing with, you're no longer allowed. That employer that you work with is no longer allowed to let you work. Now, it's up to the employer at that point to ask the employee, would you like counseling? And that's where the employee assistance program comes in. Our substance abuse professional is provided to the employee, and they can go to that person and get some counseling, get clean, come back and do what's called a return to duty test. And if they pass that test, then the employer has the right to put them back to work. But we make no claim, and we would never, there's no way to know that based on a telephone interview. I mean, we talk to people all over the United States and Canada. We couldn't know if they had an addiction problem by a 5-minute conversation. We're there to find out if, one, the process of the drug test was completed correctly, from the collection all the way to the laboratory, to the point that we received the result from the laboratory, that the scientists signed off, they're verifying the accuracy of the test, then we get the employee on the phone, verify with them that they signed the chain of custody form, agreeing to the chain of custody in the event that it's their sample involved. And then we just discuss with them what drugs are you taking that will cause this result. Because there are some medications that have marijuana in them. There are 2 drugs out there that will cause marijuana to show up in a drug test. And most people don't know that. And it's not something we advertise. Because marijuana users will then go out to their doctor and say, oh, I need a prescription for Marinol, my back is killing me. And then they can smoke as much marijuana as they want and pass every drug test. So that's what we're there for. It's not to counsel, but to help the employee find out if there is a medical explanation for that drug that showed up. And if it's cocaine or marijuana, the Department of Transportation and the federal government says there is no such thing as an explanation.
I think it's one of the most important things that you need to understand, because I try to understand what is the system in the States, because I'm married from South America and from Chile. And they have a mandatory system for the DOT and for federal association. What is the name?
Federal agencies, Department of Transportation.
Yes. But also they have a non-mandatory test. And for example, in South America, we don't have any law like in the States that they can, because it's illegal if you consume some drugs in the States. But in Chile, for example, you can consume marijuana. But if you are in a non-mandatory test, for example, in a company, and you have a rules, you have a place in your company that are not allowed to drink or not allowed to take some drugs, you just, if you're going to get positive, you're just going to just lose your job. That's all. You're not going to be in jail, for example, something like that. It's only you're going to lose your job, and that's all. And this is the reason that it's a deterrent if you say, we're going to have a drug testing, and you need to care about your job, and that's all. You know that? This is for workplaces.
You have a question back here, sir?
I was just going to mention that in the 1970s, the mid-1970s, the railroad industry did an extensive study as to how many of operating crews had an alcohol or drug problem, and it worked out about 60%. Well, since then, as a matter of fact, they used to tell me the caboose was on the train only to hold the booze. And since then, the industry has begun testing. What is the experience today in, say, the railroad industry? How many positive test positive?
I can't say in the railroad industry in general, but I can report to you that the DOT testing is about, a positivity rate is about 5 to 6%. Now, I don't know if, again, if that would be including alcohol or all the 5 drugs.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, I think the railroad industry today, I think, is less than 1%.
Yeah.
And that's both alcohol and any
It's got one of the
illegal
smaller
drug.
pools of employees too,
Yeah.
across the board.
But then go back to your question, because, I think it's a very important one that, people say, well, it's my right. I want to recreationally, use marijuana or use drugs or something like that. I have the right to do that. See, I don't believe in recreational felonies. That's our position in the United States, that using these drugs are against the law. So you end up with a situation where once you start breaking the law, whether it's smoking marijuana, it's so much easier to break another law. And there is the gateway concept. We'll actually start beginning to break one law, you break another law. And it's a cascading event. It's something that we've seen, and I strongly go and oppose that. Would encourage people, if they want recreation, try tennis. Try racquetball. It's a much more positive experience than smoking marijuana.
If you look at this, might like to comment on their experience with testing or testing in schools, how it works in Sweden, or is it anything?
I can tell an episode from Norway. It's about the police with the narco dogs going into classroom in school to detect whether the students have marijuana. That was met with many press articles and protesting. So, and political parties, some of them wanted to stop this. Compromise was it could go on, but only the students accepted to be checked. So I wonder, could such things be done in a smarter and less controlled way?
That's I think what they're trying to do in the United States, at least in the states that I represent, which most of the schools we do is Indiana and Kentucky and the Midwest. They get to know the students, but the parents agree to the process as well. That way, when it's only an issue, granted, it's only an issue when the kid shows up positive. Most parents like to believe that their kids are clean. When those few do show up positive and it's not something we prescribe, it's marijuana or cocaine, that's when the whole program becomes that question. And that's when what I addressed is that as long as there's standards and there's a policy, procedures are all met every time, legal defensibility always stands up. So, parent agrees to it, the kid agrees to it, the kid still use drugs, it's still possible.
I have to report to you too that, like, with great embarrassment, I live 30 miles north of Philadelphia, and my school district, Penn School District, has 1,000 graduating seniors. The whole school has 4,000 students. It's like a city if you go to it. It's huge. But the school board does not allow drug testing. No matter how many, I'm a member of the school board, I could put the picture. It's just not, but they're not interested in doing it. It's a very liberal community. Not my children, not my, so it's very tough. And the road you're going down is very important because the beginning of drug testing children in schools is the beginning of them being tested when they go into the workforce. And it sets up a standard for a cleaner, safer society.
The deterrent effect is just astounding. It's a massive deterrent to drug test children and to drug test anyone, really, from employment, whatever school. It's a major deterrent, and it works. We've got the United States history of drug testing shows that it works. Under 20% positivity rate in the 80s, down to 1% in the federal program. It's astounding.
You want to go to a very good website run by Dr. Paul's organisation called Prevention of Harm. That's all in one word, I guess. And that's a very good website that outlines the school drug testing process. Any other questions? Different contexts, but roadside testing.
I have a question too. I'm working with music and pop dancing and things like that. And I'm working live West. And often when I talk to young people, they said that the Beatles wrote the song when they were high up, dying and so. And that's a fact. Yeah. What do you think?
What do I think about it?
No, well, yeah, what should I tell them when they ask me?
Tell them to look at Whitney Houston. She's dead. Tell them to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, in the United States, the best drug testing treatment programs are for physicians and airline pilots. Right? There's a 78% success rate over there. If I were to go in, I only get 30 days worth of treatment and there's no follow-up, and my success rate is like in the 15 or 14% rate. Musicians in the United States die routinely of substance abuse. So it's a very, very, very difficult area for musicians and actors to be involved because of the environment. But in order to enhance your creativity, certainly, there are better ways than drugs.
Yeah, I think we're on the right way. So it's a book that
If I could interject, I would tell the children and ask them, well, what do you think the song would have been like if they weren't high? And how much better could it have been?
Then they say that he never wrote the song if he had to.
But exactly, you just never, these were talented guys anyway, Beatles. They were talented anyway. How much more talented would they have been if they weren't on LSD? And, the songs could have been better, but you never know. But you can't blame the drugs for the positive result of the song. You blame the beauty of the musician.
He is a musician.
I was a musician.
Timothy Leary was a Harvard professor that advocated the use of LSD. And I don't believe that, his genius came from the hallucinogens that he was taking. And most of our geniuses today are not substance abusers. They do take a look at, our industry, our science, and our entertainment industry. They don't need marijuana or cocaine to be creative if you truly have a creative genius. It probably does, though.
Very interesting topic. Thank you for your contributions to our stories. We want to very nice. If there are no